So we have writings. We have writings of the Akkadians. We have a mask of a powerful Akkadian, possibly Sargon. So this is the first emperor, the first empire that arises in this area. I do want to mention a movie. I like the Rockies, and I seem like a pretty cool guy. There's a movie called The Scorpion King, came out a while back, in which the movie talks about the Rock as an Akkadian with magical powers. I like the movie. It's a lot of fun, but please don't bring that up, that the Akkadians had magical powers and looked like the Rock. Let's continue on with our invasions of Mesopotamia. People constantly moving into the area and the cities having to fight against each other and to fight against these outsiders. The next empire to come into the area are called the Amorites, around 2000 BC. So we've moved ahead about 300 years now. Here's a group called the Amorites coming in. We know where they came from. They came from the area of present-day Syria. And this would have been where the Tigris and Euphrates kind of start, at that the source up there. The nomads from Syria moving into Mesopotamia, and eventually taking over the whole area. We know that they create a city at Babylon. This is where this city comes from. It's founded at Babylon. We refer to them as the Old Babylonians because there's going to be more to do with Babylon. Babylon's going to be important throughout the rest of the ancient world, but these are the original empire at Babylon. We call them the Old Babylonians. And they are mentioned in the Bible. There's mention of the Amorites. This is actually the time they come in and destroy the city of Ur, as mentioned. And this is about the time that Abraham decides to leave the city of Ur. So either God called him to leave or he was forced to leave. But that's about the deal. It matches up with the time that the Amorites came in and took over the area. Again, the city of Babylon will be important throughout the ancient world, but here we are founding it under the Amorites. And we know a lot about one of these Amorite kings. His name is Hammurabi, and he does something really important. He is going to put together a law code. He will be known in history as the lawgiver, Hammurabi, one of these Amorite rulers. Let's talk about this code, Hammurabi's code. First of all, he didn't write it. He's not going to just pull laws out of the air. He probably, when he took over the area, dealt with all these people and decided to, if I'm going to rule these people, I need to bring their laws under control, give them all one law code so that we can go from city to city. Well, we would never even know about this if we hadn't found one of these law codes. We figured there's probably one in every town. This one was discovered. It's the only one we found. There might have been more, hopefully. This was discovered in 1901. You don't need to know that date. Just know that it's about 100 years ago. We actually found this thing. It changed history when we figured out that these Amorites, how important they were. It's a big black pylon. It's about 8 foot tall, made with black basalt, and it's kind of conical shaped, bigger at the bottom. We think there was probably one, probably put it in the town square, and there's probably one in every town. This one, once we found it, it'll be taken away and put in the Louvre. Kind of stands there lonely today in the Louvre in one of these open courtyards. Everyone wants to go see the Mona Lisa, and nobody wants to go see this big black pillar in the courtyard. 282 laws. You do not need to memorize 282 laws, but that's a lot. It's not 10 commandments. It's 282, which means you're going to need some really specific laws in there, not just generalities. And each law, if there are 3,000 lines of text, over 3,000 lines of text and 282 laws, it means that these laws go into quite detail within themselves. It's really impressive. Great detail about individual laws. Well, what are the laws about? They're about everyday life, starting with marriage and births and taxes and jobs, to divorce and property. It's all in there. Building codes, wage levels, amazing, all this stuff. And you got to look at Hammurabi and think, wow, this guy trying to run an empire recognized, I don't want to be dealing with all these little problems, just put the law out there so that everyone can follow it. I don't have to rule on everything all the time. Well, when you get a close-up of it, there it is in its pillar shape. If we get a little close-up of it, you can see the detail and all the writing on this code. One of the most famous laws, the one that's going to pop up in every textbook, is his law of how to deal with violence. Perhaps you've heard of it before. It is called an eye for an eye. And he says it in there. This is actually written in the law code, an eye for an eye. How does a judge deal with violence in his city? an eye for an eye. If somebody inflicted damage on someone else, then it's inflicted back on them. But it goes into much more detail than this. It's not just an eye for an eye. It actually defines that an eye for an eye only exists if two people are of the same level. It tells you about a hierarchy in society. If a upper level man harms a man below him, there are financial penalties. You have to pay a fine. If you cut someone's arm off or tear someone's ear off, you have to pay a fine to someone below you. If someone beneath you harms you, it's automatic death. The eye for an eye only applies at the same level. If you harm someone below you, you have to pay a fine. If you harm someone above you, it's instant death. Well, what does that tell you about society? It tells you about the society that there is violence and Hammurabi is trying to stop it. And it's a pretty good system of stopping it, because if you know if you harm somebody, that harm's going to come back on you. And if you harm a superior, you're a dead man. And if you harm someone beneath you, it's going to cost you some money. So what does that do for society? Probably cuts down on violence. Two men of the same level would be very hesitant to fight. If a nobleman walked past you, someone above you walked past you, you would probably stay out of their way. And as a nobleman with money, you'd probably not want to harm everyone you meet because it's going to cost you some money. So it probably did cut down on violence, and that's what Hammurabi is trying to do. He's trying to run an empire. You know, I got things to do. I don't have time to deal with every single bit of violence and everybody who wants to make more money or every marriage that comes along. So we need something in every town to unite everyone together. So Hammurabi probably earned a good place in society, probably well thought of at the time, trying to unite everyone. Well, this writing, if you could see the picture there, the writing looks like triangles. And that's where we get the word cuneiform. Cune, meaning a triangle shape, and then cuneiform, triangle-shaped writing. Cuneiform. And their typical means of writing this was on a clay tablet. Again, Hammurabi's code was on a pillar, but the typical everyday stuff would have been on clay tablets. They would have had a wet clay tablet, mashed it, made it rectangular shaped of some sort, and then printed on it with a triangle-shaped stylus. So you make these triangle shaped. If you're writing in, if you know this, if you're writing in wet mud, if you can't write like this because it'll tear the mud up, you got to make impressions into the mud. And so this is what you end up with, and then they'll bake them in the sun probably or in a kiln of some sort, and you end up with stuff that has survived really well over 6,000 years. The cuneiform tablets. If you go to museums, you have no problem finding them because we found a lot of them. You find whole storehouses of these tablets 6,000 years old. Pretty amazing. Well, when you look at their writing, here's a diagram of how it kind of evolved, because writing does evolve. Dating from about 4000 BC, they actually did try to write in the mud, and then it doesn't take them long by 2500 to figure out that the triangle shape is a much better deal, and then it evolves all the way to 500 BC. The ancient Persians will still be using the triangle shape. The long history of this cuneiform writing. It'll be replaced later on, which we'll get to. Well, the oldest story we have found. We found lots of documents of record keeping, even some really boring records of, Bill owes me 2 sheep. Well, the oldest story, and actually we found pieces of this at many, many cities, so everybody knew this story of a guy named Gilgamesh. Now, whether he existed or not, we don't know, but there's stories of a guy named Gilgamesh, a king. He is a king of a city of the Uruk, the king of Uruk, one of the cities that we have found. So the city is there, but did he exist? Well, this could be the equivalent of Superman. Superman's based in Gotham, New York City, but does Superman really exist? A guy named Clark Kent? No. So we think this might have been a fictional story about, what if we had this king like this in ancient times? There was a wonderful king named Gilgamesh. And it's an epic because we've put these stories together and seen that this goes on for a long time, that they love this guy, Gilgamesh, and it becomes an epic of Gilgamesh. Well, just to show you some of the stories, there is one story where he goes out and he has to fight this beast. And he eventually is able to tame this beast, and he does it through his intelligence. He is a civilized man. The beast is an unbeatable beast, but human intelligence can beat him. And then there's another story where he meets a guy building a boat. The gods have told this man that there's a big flood coming, and gives him instructions on how to build a boat, and actually in pretty precise detail, and to load animals on his boat to save them. So again, this predates the ancient biblical works. So lots and lots of stories of Gilgamesh and his beast friend named Enkidu. Once he beats the beast, his beast becomes his friend. Well, the story actually, to summarize the story, it actually has a philosophical bent to it. Gilgamesh is searching for immortality. He's traveling around. He wants to be a god. And I think you know how this turns out. He is mortal. He cannot be a god. But he has to learn the lessons as he travels around, lessons of life, that you are not immortal. You will pass away eventually. So the ancient people had the same type of beliefs and stories, ideas of their existence. Well, let's finish up here. Let's summarize these Sumerians and move on to the Egyptians. A summary of the Sumerians. Again, we're talking about the area between the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, extremely fertile, but there's always the danger of flooding there. They have the oldest cities there, and in their cities they build ziggurats. The oldest writing dates from about 4000 BC, maybe up to 3500, maybe as far back as 4500. So the first writing, oldest writing, is actually there in the Mesopotamians. Lots and lots of warfare, city versus city, and then also outsiders coming in. So constant invasion. People from Asia are drawn to this area like a magnet. And the first empires are of the outsiders, but the outsiders don't change the culture. Once an outsider takes over, the culture, the educated people tend to change the outsiders. The invaders don't change the culture changes them. The religion, we know, exists for thousands and thousands of years, so the religion doesn't change much. What are they doing great there? Well, I put the word astronomy because I mentioned astrology when they are trying to figure their futures, but in these priests keeping the records, it's astronomy. They actually are going to have really good star records. When the Greeks come here eventually, Alexander the Great, they are going to be fascinated by these records, and actually the Greeks are going to get on the idea of astronomy. So the Sumerians may not be doing astronomy, but they're keeping good star records. As far as math goes, we know that they were pretty advanced in math. They like the number 6. That seems to be their number, and then multiples of 6. They loved circles. They will be the ones breaking circles into 6 pieces, and then those 6 into 6 pieces. So we end up with 360 degrees of a circle. They did that. And a lot of engineering involved with that math. And then science. We know that they performed all kinds of surgeries, attempted surgeries. They're interested in science. They have the wheel. We also know that these kings and emperors promote trade. They will be trading with everyone around them, even as far as the Indus society. We know the Indus civilization and the Mesopotamian civilization will make connections. And then eventually when they find out about Egypt, which we'll get to in a second, they'll start moving toward Egypt. So you get a lot of trade and travel with the Mesopotamians. We know this because we found a lot of objects from all around being buried in Mesopotamia. And we're about to connect them with Egypt. So let's continue on with Egypt now.